I think we're okay.
Soonest. I don't know about PM, but it does.
It should say counting, waiting for event to start.
Thank you. We're all going to see my desktop.
Oh, wow.
5 seconds.
Hopefully we are.
Right.
Hey, we're live.
Hey.
Well, we're
Semi-live.
we're live. We're live. All right. So after breakout 1 and 2, if you're not already doing something else, if you could, well, it's not urgent because we're not going to live stream the band, but if you could help me get it back down, the whole system.
Sure.
Okay. But I think we're good.
All right, there you go.
And we'll
Make sure
the password again.
microphone's on. So we're good to go. All right. If you're listening, we're just about to start in 5-10 minutes. So excellent.
The chapel camera?
Yes, we have an extra battery. Is it still charging behind the Sanctus
Which
Real?
one? Was it the video
camcorder.
camera?
Yeah.
Yes, I put the other one in this charging.
It is right behind the Sanctus Real table, plugged into the wall. Okay, we're good.
Awesome.
All right. So no swearing.
Darn it.
Just no swearing, and just know that you're live on the internet.
Oh, hi, Internet.
Hey, welcome.
You're doing a great job. You're slow.
Slew.
Yes.
Slew.
She's our breakout moderator for our session.
Oh, fantastic. All right, great.
Everything is so nice. Hi there, how are you?
Good, dude. How's your lunch?
Pretty good. Yeah, there's sandwich things. I like pasta salad a lot.
Do you have a charger for this? It doesn't look like there's any battery.
Here, do you have a charger?
It's actually plugged in right now.
Oh, it is. You get a charger. Oh, okay, great.
Unless that outlet isn't working.
No, it should be.
Actually, can you hang out in here for this session? And Stephanie, this is Ben. He's my intern. So if you need anything, just let him know. All right.
Just command me around.
Poor Ben.
No, it's fine.
Make sure you're drinking lots of water too.
Yeah. I ate a sandwich.
Good.
I went over there,
Correct.
gluten-free thing, and I had a bunch of sandwiches.
Nice.
I'm just gonna eat this. Like, oh, yeah.
I met some of my dad's too, his friends who came help tell
Oh,
us
neat.
security who were older. And I saw them as they were leaving, I was coming back from the cafeteria. I'm like, oh, I met your parents. Hey. And I was like,
Did you tell Paul?
no, I haven't seen it all day. It's like, fine. But, yeah.
It's suggesting to restart it. It's just showing that there are no connections available. I know that's true. So if we restart it, I'll write down the password for you.
Totally shut down and then start again.
Or just restart it, yeah.
Were you guys having lunch with the VIPs? We were back, Mary was back there for a little bit, I was back there initially, and then I left out, but it was like fun. The band was sitting there, and which, speaker or guest is here.
It should, yeah. When I did it told me that there were no network connections available.
I was really excited that Kristen was coming to do the keynote, she's so good at rallying people. And then, I think Pam Victor does a wonderful job, so I was happy she was here, and then, I was excited for Scott Klusendorf, but that kind of fell in the room. But it was really cool because, not that it's cool, but.
I didn't know that was
He called my son yesterday to tell me that he comes that he
I
might
know.
just
Girl, we should get a recording.
Yeah.
That's what
Oh, it's so right. It's so cool. It's like a pro life celebrity. Well, you know. Yeah, it's correct. Yeah. There's these cool.
We're
It's
starting
true.
to it's real people now.
And David, you're right.
So you know, I know where they are.
It's just so sad, you know.
So like one of them ran out.
It just. He gave us talk about leadership at the conference last year. Yeah,
Especially some forms of art. Sharpie and duct
tape.
tape.
Duct tape.
Yeah. It's so funny with this, when it comes down to.
I was looking over this. Yes. Oh, so in the program, it said that Pam Victor is no longer. Like she stopped. Right, she was for the past 11 years and then she, this says, does it say it's had, well, it has.
Is there a website you're
So
trying to get to?
I'm pretty sure that she was president for the past. You can say was, yeah, that might sound a little bit more. And then, I don't know if this is how.
Faith, I'm sorry, is there a website that you're trying to get to?
I was gonna put an email to see if I could get a PowerPoint that's on my email downloaded and set up.
And you can't get to that without.
Could not reconnect.
This one is.
I don't know, it just sounded a little blunt, like, she was fired in 2008, and is there like a story behind that?
There is. When I was reading it, I was like.
She stepped down.
Right, I think it has something to do with the webcam abortions, like she wasn't okay with that and she said something about it, so. You could just say she left if you feel comfortable or she.
I was gonna ask her, I guess, if she came
Yeah.
early.
Yeah.
Maybe she
Usually it pops
does.
up a list.
I mean, I guess she like submitted her information.
She did, yeah, so you can ask her how she wants it worded, because in such a short introduction, she might want it worded.
Is
Right.
anyone on the stage, I can get to Eric? Hey, it's Adrian. I'm up in band room 1, and we've got the laptop plugged in, it's working fine, but we can't find an internet connection. It's just saying there are no connections available. Do you have any recommendations? Yeah, but I can't connect with it because it's telling me that it's not available.
I will be wandering up your way shortly.
Okay, I can't find CCP mobile, Tsunami, any of this. Just,
Trying to get a PowerPoint up and running for Sue. And Pam, I wanted to introduce you to Stephanie. She's gonna be moderating the breakout session, so she'll introduce you.
I'm fine.
Yeah. She's a SLU president of student.
I was for the past year. Yeah. So maybe I don't know.
So you somewhere, right?
Choose one.
Network status. Connected to the internet. Wireless.
They got this one. Oh. I can't tell you. Oh, okay.
If it doesn't pull up, and I'm sure everything.
It's made out of basically.
was this hooked up downstairs?
These chairs.
No,
They're ostrich chairs. That's what do you have something solid? That's what we're talking about. You guys can talk. Oh, okay, sure. We should ask.
So I also just need to what's next, but
Laptop downstairs.
So you're good?
so it's the.
You're right.
Great. Is it?
Very
Very
strange.
study. Theology.
Basically, yeah, there was like a window. Some of us was actually never good, right? My major was like apologetics, which is
Yeah.
so I really like that stuff. Oh, I don't know.
Great. Yeah. Are you working for? Yeah. That's great.
Hello.
How we doing?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you know.
It's not how you're doing.
You're doing well? Well, if you say life is good, you're doing well, right? Because you're a sophomore?
Yeah, I was
Yes.
thinking to meetings,
Why do you think I know that?
but I said that. So this is Tuesday. And then a couple times.
Double major / minor in English.
Maybe terrible.
And you're what, 15 going on 16?
He's reading your mind. Good.
Nothing wrong with that. I have 9 sons.
Really?
How many daughters?
2.
My dad is one of 16, 8 boys, 8 girls.
Let's hear it for your dad. What number are you in that mix?
I am one of 2.
You were number 1?
I'm number 2.
You're number 2.
Yeah, my sister is oldest.
She's,
and
okay.
My dad had 2 out of, and he was one of 16.
Oh, he was one of 6.
He was one of 16. I'm one
What
of
was
16.
he in the mix?
Oh, I don't know. He was in the middle somewhere.
In the middle.
I don't know.
All right.
All healthy and doing well.
I know how to write. What is it? They're 16 and 17.
Why don't we just do a song instead?
How was that?
What, like, yeah, there's a ton from there. Kind of like, okay, distance away from She's in the direction.
Yeah, it's like it's.
I don't know if it's out yet.
Tomorrow. They shut down your airport after
All
some
of
time.
us are employees.
Yes.
It's not like the old days.
Oh, it used to be up.
I know.
And, you know, we had nonstop, it's like the case that happens in the world.
Right.
And now you can't.
I know, it's like-
And now this is
Yeah.
so they're no longer. Anyway.
Because you lost so much history.
Yeah, no, well, I think it's a double-edged sword. One, you know, the parents are together because, my, son is a psychologist and they have a tough time, you know, they're working internationally, because you can't wear them.
You see that could be a demand that one of the airlines would want to meet.
Yeah.
Somebody's not doing a good marketing job.
You know, they're all focused on their products. So,
Yeah, well, they're missing something.
yeah. But it's really not bad. But I'm sure that anyway.
We have
Yeah,
to
I'm going with, Sun City.
west side.
Yes. So my godparents and I started out there once or twice.
So where are you all from? Fulton.
And then I got these ones.
Jeff City.
6:30. You know, it's research, the first time, like, everything. Yeah, I forgot.
Moderating. We don't need any moderating. Oh, introduce. Shut up, sit. Think of the bear cups on this. The cups.
Yeah, the thing was, like, I was like, you know, people, they all went, I did it. I'm like, oh,
Right,
come on.
so the clock is, we're gonna start in what, 2 minutes? 5 minutes? So here, okay, so here's the game plan. We're gonna introduce, she's gonna talk first. This is Sam, Sam and Megan. Here, she's the hero. You can do it all first, and then we just run it through. We know what we're gonna do. Just keep it short. John's from Arizona, he's a nice guy.
It's in the books too. It's first one.
Right. Yeah. And the young man knows there. Unless you want to sit it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see how. Yeah, I think we could, couple of dictionary.
Oh, it's oh, that's what you said about the.
White but that's.
It's always like right there, like, sure.
Ready when you are. Don't pick on her. No. He drives the car. You don't drive.
Hello and welcome to breakout session 1B, Pro-Life Laws and Politics. My name is Stephanie Baker. I'm a student at St. Louis University, and I am a moderator today. So today we're joined by acclaimed speakers, Pam Victor, Sam Lee, and John Dukowczyk. And we'll hear from each of them during this session. There'll be, and at the end of the session, there'll be about 10 minutes for questions. So good questions. Pam Victor has been the president of Missouri Right to Life for the past 11 years. She has overseen landmark pieces of pro-life legislation and has helped to build one of the largest pro-life majorities in any state legislature. Deacon Samuel Lee is the founder and director of Campaign Life Missouri, a pro-life lobby organization. He has been active in the pro-life movement since 1978 and has been a full-time pro-life lobbyist for 30 years. And John Dukowczyk has served as the president of Arizona Right to Life and is the founder and president of Southwest Life and Law Center. He is currently a member of the board of directors on the National Right to Life Committee. He has helped to write both national and state pro-life legislation over the past 35 years. So please join me in giving them each a warm welcome.
Thank you so much for that nice introduction. I'm recently retired president of Missouri Right to Life for the past 12 years. It's wonderful to see so many young people. This day has been marvelous. For many of us who have been in this battle since the beginning, since Roe v. Wade, we're constantly looking over our shoulder and saying, well, where's the next generation coming up? So it's wonderful to spend the day with that next generation, because you guys are going to have to take the baton and carry this fight forward. Those people like me that are getting up in years, I want to stay at it as long as I can, but the energy is not what it used to be. Okay, politics and abortion. What's the relationship? Wow, what's not the relationship? As I said when in the panel discussion this morning, I've had people say to me, I don't do politics. And my response is, well, politics does you. Whether you want to get involved with politics or not, politics is involved with your life. It's involved with the world you live in, and so much of the decisions that you make and the impressions that you have about your world and each other is formed by politics and influenced by politics. It's kind of hard to start, politics has always been a part of abortion, but I want to start with kind of laying a groundwork for what is the playing field of politics and abortion right now. Well, we can look back to the landmark decision in 1973 of Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolden. How many of you know what both of those decisions were? Okay. What did Doe do? What did Roe do?
Well, it legalized abortion.
Yes, it legalized abortion by striking down all existing state laws restricting a woman's access for abortion for the first 2 trimesters of pregnancy. And the states could restrict a woman's access to abortion during the 3rd trimester unless, so we have this subordinate clause, and as a former high school English teacher, I have to tell you, you have to look for the devil in the subordinate clauses. That it was, the states could not restrict it unless the life or the health of the mother was impacted. And that's where Doe comes in. So who knows what Doe did?
It legalized abortion in all trimesters.
Because health was defined as anything the mother wanted it to be. Okay? So the combination of Roe and Doe gave us unlimited access for the full 9 months of pregnancy. And even in states like Missouri that supposedly have a restriction on 3rd trimester abortions, there really is no restriction because of the health exception. Unless the life or the health of the mother is impacted. Well, health of the mother is anything, so the health exception means nothing. And that's why so often in pro-life legislation, you'll have a pro-abortion legislator said, oh, I support this if you put in a health exception. Well, they want the health exception because they know that it will basically what we call swallow the law. It will eliminate the impact of the law because of the way health has been defined. So back in 1973, there were a lot of people that thought, okay, now the abortion decision is settled. This is settled law. We have a ruling from the 7 Supreme Court justices who have taken over this decision from the elected representatives of the people in their own individual states and given us the right to kill unborn children for the full 9 months, which really wasn't actually stipulated in the Constitution, but the justices were so determined to find this right that they came up with something called the penumbra of the law. Penumbra, which is like in the shadow. So basically they were placing something there because of their wanting it to be there rather than it actually being there. They were really stretching to find it. So this being settled law, what influence can we have on that? What can we do now to protect babies and protect mothers? And it was really a really gut-wrenching decision that those of us who are pro-life, and a lot of us didn't even see this coming. I tell the story that I was a new mom with a brand new baby. And I heard that the Roe decision had been given down by the Supreme Court on KMOX radio one morning when I was giving my baby a bath. I was stunned. I mean, I was stunned. And I was so upset. I called a pastor at our Catholic church and I said, have you heard this? You know, how on earth can they say this? What can we do? And he said, Pam, don't get all upset about it. He said, as soon as people find out what an abortion is, they're going to overturn this. 1973. 57 million abortions later. So do we know what it is? You know? Yeah, we know what it is, but it's still going on. So legally and politically, people tried to address this. We started pushing at the edges of Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Moulton, and what can we do here? And there were a couple of decisions that the Supreme Court made after that that opened the door to us being able to impact this at least in some degree. And those decisions were the Webster decision, which came out of Missouri, and this was the Webster versus Reproductive Health Services. And I'm not going to go into long versions of this other than to say that what Webster did was it allowed the states to legislate in an area regarding abortion that we didn't think was possible. And subsequent to that, we also had Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which also did the same thing. Even though there was some very disappointing aspects of both of those decisions, both of them opened the door and said, yes, the states could impose some regulations on abortions. So that has allowed us to look for every way possibly legislatively and to challenge Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Moulton every chance we get. Well, what's been the result of that? Well, politically, when you elect pro-life legislators, you can influence them and lobby them, educate them on the issue, and you can get some pro-life laws passed. Well, what's happened in Missouri? Well, Missouri has had some incredibly good successes with pro-life legislation. Things like requiring that only physicians can perform abortions, hospital privileges required for abortionists, parental consent before a minor's abortion, ban public funding of abortion, ban partial birth abortion, the 72-hour reflection period, which was just passed in Missouri last year, which means that once a mother meets with the required counseling session, the first meeting with the abortionist, that she must have 72 hours to reflect on that before she has the abortion. It's a milestone piece of legislation that we know is going to save lives. Tax credits for pregnancy resource centers, mandatory ultrasounds, legislation that prohibits abortions on viable unborn children. Anyway, we've had tremendous success in Missouri. And what's the result of that? How do we impact abortion with this legislation? Well, as we mentioned this morning in the big session, this handout is available over here. We really think that the pro-life legislation that has been passed in Missouri is one big reason why we have seen the declining number of abortions in Missouri. At the all-time high in 1980, there were 21,671 abortions on Missouri women. And the last year that we have numbers for, which is 2012, there were 9,027. Now that's reduced by more than 50%. Now, granted, it's tragic that there are over 9,000 abortions in Missouri. But to think that we've had such an impact in spite of the fact that we have Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton. Legislation can save lives, and that's what we've seen. But legislation does something else as well. It also educates. How many of you remember hearing about the partial birth abortion ban? You guys may have been too young for that. Some of you have. A partial birth abortion is a particularly heinous abortion procedure where an unborn child is pulled through the birth canal by the feet, and everything except the head of the child is delivered. The head of the child is left inside the mother, and everything else has been delivered. And the abortionist takes a curette, a sharp instrument, and if you feel this little soft spot, base of your skull, inserts the curette in there, opens it up, sucks out the brains, and delivers a dead baby. That's a partial birth abortion. 80% of the people in the country opposed to that. Now you have to wonder what the other 20% were thinking. But 80% of the people in the country opposed that. And that legislation was debated for several years. It was passed in Missouri. I always have to look at dates here. It was passed in Missouri in Sam, you know what year that was.
1999.
1999. And at the United States Congress level, they passed two versions of it, but they were thrown out by the Supreme Court until the United States Congress used basically the Missouri language. And because that language was more acceptable, it was upheld in the courts. But because that was debated for a number of years, people were talking about it. And anybody that was paying attention at that time remember seeing this pencil sketch of a partial birth abortion. It showed the baby partially delivered. And it showed the instrument going into the base of the skull. And people saw that, and they just found that so totally unacceptable. And it was following the debate on the partial birth abortion legislation that studies showed for the first time in our history since Roe v. Wade, the majority of the people consider themselves pro-life. So legislation can educate enough that you can change public opinion. There's another piece of legislation that's being considered by the Missouri legislature this year that was just passed in Kansas that bans dismemberment abortions, which can have the same impact. It will save lives, but it will also educate. Coming up on my last 2 minutes here. To finalize it, I want to tell you one story about the impact of legislation. In 2006, we had the clinic regulation. Sam's the expert on dates and numbers here, so I'm looking over to him.
2007.
2007, that required that an abortionist have practicing privileges at a hospital within 30 miles of where the abortion is performed. That makes sense because in some places, the abortionists were coming in from out of the state. They were flying in, killing babies and going back out. They had no practicing privileges to follow up if something happened as a result of the abortion, to follow up with the mother in the hospital to be able to tell them exactly what happened. So they need to have practicing privileges. Well, as a result of that, the abortion clinic in Springfield, Missouri closed almost immediately. That abortion clinic is today the Missouri Baptist Children's Home. Now, that's a God thing. You know, I'm saying there's a lot of God things happening. But all of this legislation is dependent on having the right people there to vote on it. And that's where the politics gets involved. If we don't elect pro-life people at all levels, we're not going to get the pro-life legislation that can save lives. Do we want to eventually overturn Roe v. Wade? Well, those 7 Supreme Court justices that gave us Roe and Doe didn't just appear one day. They were appointed by elected presidents and approved by elected senators who were there because of the votes of people, who were there because of the political process. Politics is not a dirty word. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to make a difference. It's an opportunity for your voice to be heard. Brian said we should end with a call to action. And like I said this morning in the panel discussion, my call to action to you is be educated on the issues, know where the candidates stand. Let the life issue be your guiding issue when you go to vote. Get involved. Help pro-life candidates. Get other people involved. Be informative. Politics can save lives, and you have the opportunity to make that difference. Thank you so much for being here today.
Let's see how this works here. Works. Pam just gave an excellent overview of the abortion law and pro-life in Missouri. And you might be asking yourself a question, Pam, Deacon Sam, John, why is it that we just don't pass a law that just bans all abortions? Wouldn't that just be simpler and easier? And I'm going to give you the short answer, not the long answer. And the short answer is because despite some changes on the court since the Roe versus Wade decision in 1973, the Roe and Doe decisions, even including some positive decisions like the Webster case and the Casey decision, and even later the court upholding the federal ban on partial birth abortion. The courts have not yet allowed states to do that. In fact, that was one of the things that some states did early on after the 73 decisions. And that was to try to pass state laws which would either define an unborn child as a person, for instance, which would have the effect of saying their rights need to be protected too, and those attempts failed. So we are compelled to do everything we can in the law right now, in addition to all the other efforts, but everything in the law that we can right now to protect unborn children and to help their mothers the best way that we can. We're not there yet. Some people call this a chipping away process, and that certainly is part of a legal strategy. You know, you pass a law in Missouri, you pass a law in other states, Congress passes a law, it gets challenged, it goes up to the Supreme Court. They say, well, we didn't mean to necessarily say this in Roe versus Wade. Yes, you can uphold that law. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is we're just doing what we can. You know, if you had a burning building and there were a burning orphanage and there were 25 children in there, you would save as many as you could, even if you couldn't save them all. And that's what we try to do in our pro-life legislative and lobbying work. We try to save as many as we can in the best way that we can. Now, how many here have ever thought they'd like to lobby for any issue? All right, so good, a handful here. How many of you are interested in politics in general? Okay, or in the law in general, or just law? Okay, actually, a lot of people are just interested in the law. So good. I'm going to give you the very short version about lobbying since I'm doing it for over 30 years. I'm not saying I'm the best lobbyist. I just have been doing it for a long time. And the key thing in lobbying is like any other job is relationships. It's having a relationship. You know, let's step back for a second. If we think about what goes on in an abortion, there is a broken relationship. Certainly the woman, the mother, has a broken relationship with her unborn child. If she's considering an abortion or has an abortion, she has it most likely with the father of her unborn child, and it's a broken relationship with God. Isn't that really what it comes down to? And those relationships need to be worked on, they need to be healed, they need to be solidified, they need to be challenged. But so often abortion is because there's a breakdown there. How many women have said, and I know some of our representatives from the various pregnancy resource center agencies who have dealt with women who are post-abortion, how many women have said to them, and I've certainly read it in the literature, you know, if there was just that one person who would have told me, you know, it's okay, you don't have to abort your baby, they would have had some hope. But because of a breakdown in relationships, they didn't have that. So that's certainly whether you get involved in politics or legislation or lobbying or not, that is a key element. If you're talking to someone who's in your school or a cousin or a friend or in your church, it could be anywhere. It's building that relationship with that person. It's not only showing that you care, looking like you care, it's actually caring for them. You know, it's the same thing in lobbying. I mean, all sorts of lobbying, but particularly in this area, it's building relationships with legislators. Pam has talked about one way you do that is that you get involved in political campaigns. And you start from the state representative or state senator or congressional, whatever level that you would be doing is getting directly involved. And you can do that right now. You don't have to wait until you're a voting age. You can do that now and get involved. I will tell you, candidates always want young people with energy. They want money, sure, but they really want people with energy and people with drive and people willing to work hard. And because the pro-life movement collectively over the years, in Missouri and other states have been doing that, we now have the largest majorities of pro-life legislators in our state legislatures ever in this country. Not in every state, but certainly in more states than before. So that's a key thing. I want to talk about a framework of understanding or of looking at of how, of the purpose or the reason to pass pro-life legislation. And I'm going to take this from Pope John Paul II, now St. John Paul II. Now, you might be thinking, oh, this is going to be some big Catholic thing. Yes, this is going to be taken from a document that he wrote 20 years ago called, in the Latin, Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life. But you don't have to be Catholic to appreciate what he wrote, because what Pope John Paul II wrote was a synthesis of everything that had been going on in the pro-life movement throughout the world up until 1995. And he consulted with bishops and with ministers, not just Catholic, but from all denominations, and with pro-life groups and alternatives to abortion agencies, to sort of see what was going on out there in the world that was the threats to innocent human life, as well as the efforts to protect those lives. And he synthesized this and put it in a theological framework, which is strongly grounded in Scripture. He starts out close to the beginning of this document he wrote 20 years ago, The Gospel of Life. And you Google it, you'll find it right away. And I encourage you to read it. And if you're in a position to do a school paper and you want to pick it as a subject or a topic, it'd be a perfect topic for you to pick up The Gospel of Life. But early on, he talks about how from the very beginnings, from Genesis, we see the assault on innocent human life within our families. And what did he have a powerful meditation on? Cain and Abel. You know, Abel was the one who offered the sacrifice to God and was pleasing to God. Cain did not. Cain got angry, got jealous, killed his brother, his innocent brother Abel. His blood was spilled on the ground. That's no different than abortion, a breakdown in relationship within families. He talks about that, and then he goes throughout the document to sort of weave sort of the collective wisdom from all the pro-life groups from up to that point, and it continues to this day. And I want to give 6 sort of reasons that he gives that we should pass pro-life legislation. Some of them are very obvious, and some of them maybe not so obvious. The first one is the protection of innocent human life from its very beginnings. He wrote, among all the crimes which can be committed against life, procured abortion. And procured abortion is just another way of just saying an abortion that a person gets. Procured abortion has characteristics making it particularly serious and deplorable. And he said, our laws must ensure the protection of those innocent human lives. It is a fundamental right to life. I think we didn't even have to come here to know that. All right. The second thing was support for pregnant women and families. Oh, okay. What does he mean by that? He said, it must be noted that it is not enough to remove unjust laws. That is, it's just not enough to try to make abortion illegal in Missouri or throughout the country. He said, the underlying causes of attacks on life have to be eliminated, especially by ensuring proper support for families and motherhood. Because there are many women who believe they have no choice. You know, they talk about pro-choice and it's my right to choose. Many, many women, maybe even most women, don't believe they have a choice because they don't have the support from a family member, from the father of her unborn child, from the boyfriend, her husband, from whatever it might be. So what he's saying is that a family policy must be the basis and driving force of all social policies. And he wrote this 20 years ago. So support for pregnant women and families. Educate the public in forming our consciences. Pam has given an excellent description about how the partial birth abortion debate in this country, as well as other debates and legislation, has helped people form our consciences. He wrote, although laws are not the only means of protecting human life, nevertheless, they do play a very important and sometimes decisive role in influencing patterns of thought and behavior. How many times have you heard people say, well, it's legal, therefore it must be okay? You know, whether you're talking about abortion or marijuana in Colorado or whatever it might be. For a lot of people, they have a very simplistic, unfortunately simplistic attitude. If it's legal, then it must be moral, it must be okay. What he is saying is that as we work on these laws and pass these laws, they develop our consciences. He says the fourth thing is to promote true democracy and true peace. Well, what does he mean by that? He said it is impossible to further the common good, that is, what is benefits the community at large, without, first of all, defending the right to life. You can have the appearance of peace. You know, we're relatively at peace in our country. Most people, most of the time, don't get shot at or assaulted when they walk down the street. Okay? We hear about it, we see it, but for most people that doesn't happen. Relative peace, except it really is not. Because there's one category, more than one, but there's certainly one category of people, the unborn child and the mother who's rejected or who's disregarded, who are not at peace in our community. So he said we can't have true peace and we can't have true democracy, because democracy means a recognition of equal rights among all people, not just those that the government says should be equal. We can't have those if we don't change the laws on abortion. So the fifth reason to pass pro-life laws is that it gives us an opportunity to fill our obligation to protect life. He said everyone has an obligation to be at the service of life. Individuals, families, groups, and associations. Notice he didn't say older people. He didn't say smart people. He didn't say just people who are lobbyists. Everyone, in whatever capacity, students, parents, whatever we are, have an obligation to protect human life. And there's lots and lots of ways to do that, which we are learning at this conference today. But one of those is to work on pro-life legislation and to pass pro-life legislation. And lastly, and he didn't apply this just to legislation, but he said this is across the board. Working in the pro-life work, and I would say this is especially true in legislation, in my experience here in Missouri, provides an opportunity for people of all Christian faiths and all religions to work together to protect human life. Think about that. If there's one activity where Christians from all denominations or non-denominational come together on, it's on the pro-life movement. I see it over and over every day in Jefferson City. Whether you're talking about legislators who are of different denominations, or you talk about lobbyists. I have a close friend of mine who's Southern Baptist, and he's as Southern Baptist as the Pope's cat. And we worked together and have worked together for 30 plus years. And you know what? We probably never even met each other. And if we had, we wouldn't have had developed a relationship. But those relationships among the churches, among denominations. A few years ago, when the Affordable Care Act, that's the health care law that passed in Congress that President Obama promoted, passed, in which the HHS mandate, that's the mandate that is compelling people to fund abortions and sterilization and contraception in the healthcare plans. We had a bill to try to give people conscience protection. We had Assemblies of God ministers and Southern Baptist ministers and Missouri Synod Lutheran and Catholic, and I'm missing some here, all got together for a rally with hundreds and hundreds of people. I know Missouri Right to Life was a huge part of that. All together, lobbying, working, praying, all those things together. I've got basically no time left, so I'm going to, in very short order, give the 3 types of laws. So I'll give you the 6 reasons the Pope, speaking to all Christians and all people of goodwill, the 6 reasons why we should do pro-life legislation. I'm going to talk about briefly the 3 types, and this is sort of my way of talking about the types of legislation that we can do. The first type is legislation that regulates abortion practice. Pam has already talked about some of that. Banning partial birth abortion, parental consent laws, parental notification. Only doctors can perform abortions and have to have admitting privileges. Now, we do these things certainly because, although we don't like abortion, we don't want women to be injured any more than they have been in abortion. But the effect of these laws is it disqualifies a lot of doctors from doing abortions because they can't get staff privileges because they're not a very good doctor. Or it requires licensing of facilities which have been unclean, and therefore these facilities have to close. Pam didn't mention, but right now there's only 1 abortion clinic in Missouri that's functioning. At one time there were about 10 or so. So we're talking about in the 1980s. That again shows the effect that the laws have in reducing that. So regulating abortion practice. Secondly, second type of legislation is to withdraw the governmental support or the community support or even any personal support for abortion. Pam, I think, talked about restricting funding for abortion, your Hyde Amendment, if you've ever heard of that, Hyde Amendment. So restricting funding for abortion, cutting off government funding to Planned Parenthood. I know that various states have had some success, but not complete success in doing that. And then conscience protection laws. You know, Pope John Paul II talked about the need to protect the conscience rights of doctors and nurses. Do you know that was the very first pro-life law that was passed in Missouri after the 1973 Roe and Doe decisions? That was to protect the rights of doctors, nurses, and hospitals, and midwives, and other categories. They did not have to participate in abortion. And that battle continues to this day. And the third thing is to pass laws that make it easier for women not to have abortions. Okay? We normally think of the laws as things as punitive, as stopping people from doing things. But sometimes the law is there to help people to do good things and to make good choices. So that includes here in Missouri, for close to 20 years now, we've had funding for alternatives to abortion. We're talking about tax dollars. Our legislature has appropriated money for alternatives to abortion agencies, which is, I see a couple of them represented here today. They've been getting some portion of that, a piece of that pie, to help in their ministry. Tax credits, that is for people who donate to these agencies, they get money back in their tax returns. These are all the types of things that we can do. I'm going to stop here, and otherwise I'll be taking up John's time here. Thank you.
What I'm going to do. Chair. Slide over here. And I'm going to sit. So that way, I can see all of you. Now up high so you can see me. You've heard from 2 experienced individuals who have been involved in the legal efforts, political efforts for the last 30 plus years. And I've had the pleasure of knowing their work and working with Sam especially for 35 years. And what I want to talk about today is a sort of a wrap up and a tie-in is what the law really can do. Because you will have people who tell you, I don't want to be involved in that. I don't want to be involved in law. I don't want to be involved in politics. That's all dirty business. And frankly, it is. It's messy. It's Like you're making a pie and you gotta use the flour and the flour gets everywhere. And some people like to refer to pigs in the mud. Maybe you do so in Missouri, or is it Missouri? It depends on what side of the state you're in. I learned that. If you're over on this side, it's Missouri, or if you're over in Jeff City, it's Missouri, and life is good, and whatever. But the key is this. The key is this. The law is a teacher. The law is a teacher of what's right and wrong in the eyes of people. So what people say is if it's legal, it must be okay. Now, we all know that's not true. We know that's not true because we've studied history. Because there have been regimes, there have been dictatorships where everything that dictator did was legal, but it wasn't right. But in this country, we believe that our laws are good. And so it's very hard to convince people that something is legal and not right. But that's what we have to do. So we have to teach, and we have to use past legislation because the legislation then becomes a teacher. The history of Roe for the last 42 years and its progeny, which is a funny word for saying all those cases that came after Roe, is basically a history of one big lie, predicated on a total misrepresentation of the law and the Constitution. Why do I say that? Because the Constitution of these United States has 2 amendments which directly touch upon the right to life. Now, can anyone tell me those 2 amendments? The 5th Amendment and the 14th Amendment directly touch upon the right to life. The 5th Amendment says that the state, and we're talking the federal government at this point, cannot take away your right to life, liberty, or your property without this thing called a due process of law. That means you have to go through the motions. You have to go into the court, you have to file your papers, you have to prove it, you have to do this, this, and this. The 14th Amendment says the same thing, applying that particular procedural right to the states, saying states cannot take away your right to life without due process of law. So if a person goes and commits a heinous crime, murders a bunch of people, and they catch him and they prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury that he committed the crime, and the judge wants to execute him or issue a capital punishment, that's due process of law, because he was proved guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Does the unborn child get any due process? Why do the courts get away with saying that the unborn child doesn't have due process? Because they said the child's not a person. Why do they say the child's not a person? Because they want to be able to kill him. So the laws dealing with abortion are unjust laws. They violate the natural order. They violate biology. They violate the facts. Because we all know, scientifically, medically speaking, that entity growing within the womb of a female human being must be a human being. Can't be a carrot, can't be a dog, can't be a guinea pig, has to be a human being. They don't want to admit that. Although these days, sometimes, and you've heard already from Mark, there are people that admit it and they don't care and they got all sorts of excuses why it's okay to kill people. But the law is supposed to be a protector of all persons. That's where the second part of the 14th Amendment comes in, which is the equal protection of all human beings. So when we're talking to people and we're trying to educate them on why they have to be involved in changing the laws and electing good pro-life legislators at the local level, the state level, and the federal level, It's important that these individuals being elected understand these basic principles. And I don't care if the guy's running for dog catcher or school board, you want to know whether he's pro-life. And the reason you want to know whether he's pro-life is because if he can't protect unborn children, how do you think he's going to take care of your dog? Now, some people, they're more concerned about taking care of dogs than they are taking care of people. But the bottom line reality is if you can't trust somebody to protect children, you can't trust them to protect your dollars. You can't trust them to protect anything. And we, as the voters, and you as future voters, have a responsibility to hold their feet to the fire. And you work with groups like Missouri Right to Life to elect only pro-life individuals. So it's a threshold issue for you. From a political perspective, if you're pro-life, now you can come in the door, now we can talk about everything else. You're not pro-life, you don't even cross my threshold. Oh, but he's a good person on all these other issues. But he happens to be a racist. Or he happens to be a bigot. Or in this case, he happens to think it's okay to kill babies. Sorry, folks, out the door. And that's your attitude across the board. And it's not party related. You know, Missouri had a history of being one of the few states that had bipartisan and serious bipartisan support on the life issues. Democrats and Republicans routinely worked together with guys like Sam to pass pro-life legislation because it was the right thing to do. So those of you who are in predominantly Democratic areas within the community, within the state, you need to challenge those people to be pro-life, or they're not going to get your vote. You need to find people who are Democrats in those predominantly Democratic areas to run for office and challenge the pro-abortion Democrat, to defeat them, to show the Democrats that there are pro-lifers who are going to stand up within their party and not walk around and say, oh, well, I'm going to vote Democrat even though the person's a baby killer supporter. I mean, think about it. They support the killing of babies, and you think that's acceptable? You got people that are afraid to say funny words on TV and radio, or, oh, we got to change the Washington Redskins because, oh, that's offensive to Native Americans, but maybe it's okay for them to support the killing of babies? Come on, folks, let's get real. And you have got to call them to the carpet. Do not be intimidated by the left, by the media, by anybody. You stand your ground because you have the truth on your side. The law at one time said that's a baby in the womb. And I can cite you chapter and verse of cases throughout the country prior to Roe v. Wade that pointed out the unborn child having certain rights. In fact, as recently as 1964, there was a case of a woman. She was a member of a particular religious sect that refused to have transfusions, blood transfusions. She was pregnant. She did not want to have a blood transfusion. She's in the hospital. The hospital says, if you don't have a blood transfusion, your baby's going to die. I don't want to have it on religious grounds. They went to the court. And the court said that baby's right to life trumps her religious conviction. Because her religious conviction will result in the death of an unborn child. Did the Supreme Court reference that case? No. The Supreme Court ignored the case law, the history, pulled a law review article by a pro-abortionist by the name of Cyril Means and basically quoted. The Supreme Court ignored the case law from Pennsylvania in 1850, Mills versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which said the unborn child from the moment of conception is a human being and has the right to life. The Supreme Court ignored the case law that dealt with probate decisions. That is when, somebody dies and you pass on their property. From Massachusetts, 1834, Thelson versus Woodard. Hall versus Hancock, where the court said the unborn child in the womb had a right to have a lawyer represent him or her, because they didn't know whether it was a him or her, in court to say, hey, judge, I got a right to a piece of the action, because they're dividing up the property. And the court says, look what this child, this entity can do. He can have a lawyer. He can sue for his interests. He has a right to have a guardian. Can a non-person do that? No. In fact, the law created the fiction of corporations being persons because only persons can file lawsuits. Only persons can be represented in court. So they said, hey, guess what? We have to allow these corporations to be able to sue. Well, then we're going to call them persons, even though they're groups of people, even though it's a corporation owned by somebody. So the concept of person starts with the human being in the law. And this is a history that goes all the way back to the time of Magna Carta in the American English legal system. And if we go back into ecclesiastic courts, you find the recognition of the unborn child in the womb. And you go all the way back to early days, you find that it is rooted in the natural law and in the Judeo-Christian ethic. And for those of you who want to know some stories about early church teachings and early writings, you can look up what's called the Didache, or the Epistle of Barnabas, and it recognizes the unborn child. It says you don't kill the unborn child. And if you're talking to Christians and they're saying they don't want to get involved in politics, you say, excuse me, but who was the first person that recognized the Christ? It was an unborn child named John the Baptist. Think about the story. Mary goes to visit Elizabeth because Gabriel just said, your cousin Elizabeth's having a baby. All right, we're heading over to visit. And Elizabeth hears the greeting. Well, guess who else heard the greeting? Well, John the Baptist. He stirs in the womb. He's all excited. Elizabeth recognizes that the child in her womb is stirred for joy. That child recognized the Christ. An unborn baby recognized the Christ. And you're talking to friends who don't want to get involved in politics and said, look, that unborn child got involved. You get involved. But don't just stop at the scriptures. Hippocrates, 400 years before Christ, in the Hippocratic Oath, first rule, doctors are to do no harm. And Hippocrates says, when he swears to Apollo, I will not give a woman a drug to induce an abortion. So the history of abortion has been around forever. They've always been using abortion to hide scandal, avoid this, do that, whatever. And it's always been recognized as wrong. 2 times in history, except for the United States, and now the modern day, when laws were changed to allow abortion. Soviet Russia, Nazi Germany. So, to wrap up the concept of what the importance of the law is, the law is a teacher. The law teaches those who are uneducated. We have to educate. The history of the law has always been pro-life. We need to teach that and remind that. We need to hold candidates and elected officials' feet to the fire and make sure they are supporting the pro-life, or else you get rid of them. Each of us has a responsibility to do our part. And we wonder what one person can do. You look in the mirror and you say, what do you want me to do, God? Sometimes you can do a little bit, sometimes you can do a lot. Sometimes you're the support, sometimes you're the leader. And now we're going to open up for some questions. You can sit right here.
Okay, so thank you very much all for sharing with us. And if you have a question, you can address it to someone in particular or to all three. And we have about 10 minutes left. Yes.
I guess for you, John, or just anybody, I recently heard of I think in Alabama, they allow lawyers to take the case of the unborn baby in the womb against the mother if she is in favor of having the child aborted. I was just wondering, like, how that would take place. Like, how would a lawyer like stand up for the baby in the womb, like against the mother?
Well, what would have to happen, and a judge would have to take allow this, is the lawyer would file an action on behalf of someone who would act as a guardian ad litem or a next best friend. So, for example, she said she'd be the client who filed, and I would be filing the action on behalf of her, who says, I have an interest in this child, and I think this child would want to be allowed to live, which is kind of a basic. I think I want to live. And so that's how that would have to be filed. Because for a lawyer just to file an action saying I'm representing the child, how'd that work? It could work through the father. If the father says, hey, I don't want my kid killed. Unfortunately, when we've tried it in the past, it has failed. We've tried that. We've done for father's rights. I filed actions. Jim Bob used to try filing actions up in Indiana and around the country. We've not had great success. However, if a court is willing to hear that, it's a powerful tool to raise the question. So
Hasn't father's rights been specifically denied by the courts?
over the years.
Yeah.
So the court did, Pam talked about the Casey decision in 1992. There was a spousal notification. So the husband had to be notified by the wife that she was going to have an abortion, and the court struck that down. So it's been tough trying to get those rights accepted by the courts.
Think of that, a man who is legally married, the father of the child, has no right to prevent the mother of the child from killing his child.
Or even know.
Even know.
Right.
We have a legislator who's this young, and he's a very pro-life man that crushed him. I mean, it changed him forever.
Right.
That he found out that his wife had aborted his child without his knowledge. And he still feels guilt over that. And I mean, when you hear this man tell this story, it just breaks your heart. But, you know, the father has no rights under the law.
We have to remember that, you know, abortion affects not only the child by killing the child, not only the mother by scarring the mother, even if she thinks she's in favor, but also it harms the father. And those effects are a lifetime. Tragically, they are. Yes, ma'am.
How do you argue, like, what's the best way to go about people who say that, like, people are always going to have abortions? It's just like when it's illegal, they'll just do it back alley and it'll be unsafe. And so how do you argue against that? And because people are like, oh, well, if we're going to have abortions, you might as well make it safe and sterile and clean.
And you say people rob banks every day, people drive drunk every day. So why have any laws? We have laws. The purpose of law is to have order. Is to have reasonable order in a community, in a society. It's an agreed upon set of rules that we're all going to act in a way that respects the rights of others. That's the purpose of law, to have an ordered society. Abortion says we're not going to kill the most innocent member of our society. And yeah, there are going to be people who are going to violate the law. But guess what? When abortion was illegal, most people said, oh, it's wrong, we're not going to do it. And there are two countries that made abortion illegal, and the abortion rate dropped to almost nothing. Poland is one of them, and the other is
Chile.
Thank you. Good job. All right. Yes, ma'am.
It seems to me that fighting abortion, we've just been a lot more effective on the state level. And I was wondering if, and then on the federal level, you know, kind of floundering. And so I was just wondering, is there any way to translate that state success to a federal level?
Well, first of all, you have to understand, most of the laws that affect us now have always been at the state level. Right. We tend to think of the debates at the federal level. It's not really the case. Your driving laws, your murder laws, your laws requiring that you get educated, all these types of things are at the state level. So and abortion was that way before the Roe v. Wade decision. Okay, it wasn't a federalized issue for the most part. Secondly, it's much easier, and I'm talking from my experience in Missouri and from colleagues that talk in other states, it's much easier to influence the policies at the state level or the local level than it is at the federal level. I can pretty much go into anybody's office most times of the day, or pull them off the floor and talk to them. Now, if I were to go to Washington DC, I'd have to make an appointment with the lower level intern who might make an appointment for the chief of staff, who maybe eventually I'd talk to the senator if I ever got that far. So it's really the access is a question, plus the influence. I mean, here in Missouri, in your state capitals, whatever state you're from, a group, or just even a number of individuals, legislators will tell me if they get letters, particularly state representatives, if they get letters from 5 people in their district, we're talking about districts that have 20,000 plus registered voters. Okay, I may be lowballing that. I forget the exact number. But if they get letters from 5 people in their district, they pay huge attention to that, because that means that there's many poor people who didn't write to them who are interested and so they sort of translate that out. At the federal level, I mean, it's from all over the country that are hearing from people. So I'm not really answering your question except to say it's much more difficult to do that. But yet, if you want to elect a U.S. senator who's going to confirm a pro-life justice to the Supreme Court, more often than not, that person has held lower political office, been elected to Congress, been a state senator, been a state governor, a state attorney general, whatever it might be.
I want to add to, even though pro-life, our legislation is most effective and most prolific at the state level, the federal level holds the trump card. Federal law trumps state law. The Roe v. Wade decision will trump. If we try to, in Missouri, we recognize that an unborn child is a person, but it doesn't undo Roe v. Wade, because Roe v. Wade is a Supreme Court decision that trumps state law. But we can put pressure at the federal level by passing legislation at the state level. That can bubble up. That shows the groundswell of support for a particular legislation or particular point of view. So you put pressure on the federal government by being active at the state level. If Roe v. Wade were overturned tomorrow, that wouldn't end abortion. What it does then is it puts it back in the states. So you want to build a strong pro-life network in the states, because hopefully we're going to get a chance to vote on that at some point if they do overturn Roe v. Wade. But Roe v. Wade won't end, or the legal abortion won't end just by overturning Roe v. Wade. It's got to happen at the state level as well.
And let's clarify some things. A Supreme Court decision is not a law. Okay? When the legislature passed the Clinic Regulations Bill or the Informed Consent Bill, it was signed by the governor, that's a law. That's a statute or a code. The Supreme Court is ruling, is a decision. And that decision is supposed to be, when it's done properly, a comment on the constitutionality of a particular law or a particular action. And this is why the Roe v. Wade decision and his progeny is so egregious and such an offense to the law, to the concept of the law. Because everybody thinks, oh, it's the law of the land. It's not really. But everybody lives as if it is. The Congress of the United States could pass a law taking away the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court to deal with the abortion issue, if they had the guts, if we had the people to support it. The reason why we need to have pro-lifers at all stages and all levels is because not only is the election of a senator instrumental and necessary if we're going to have the appointment of a pro-life justice, although that's never a guarantee, but the election of senators who are pro-life also affect the appointment of other officials and cabinet members, people in the administrations. The reason we want a pro-life president, and we want to have a pro-life president who is surrounded by pro-life staff and support, is because you put a person in charge of HHS, or you put a person in charge of your IRS, or you put a person in charge of these various departments, you want to have a pro-life message being sent throughout that entire department. One of the problems we've had over the last 8 years, and the same thing we had back during the Clinton days, is you had a pro-abortion mentality going out with foreign aid. And so you had foreign aid to various countries having a hook saying you've got to do pro-abortion, Planned Parenthood thing, or else we're not going to give you the money. You had the whole thing with the IRS, where you have people who are affecting pro-life organizations by not giving them their tax stamps. So at the federal level, we have our work cut out for us. At the state level, if you're successful, as you all in Missouri have been, you have the greater likelihood of electing, pro-life individuals to the state and federal level. But again, it starts with you being actively involved. And I'll tell you this, there's 5 people and they get nervous. But if you organize your precinct, if you organize your community, if you work with Missouri Right to Life so that Missouri Right to Life can say, we've got people in every single precinct, in every single district, ready to get out and vote on election day, or to make sure if you have early voting that everybody gets in their ballot, that's where you make the difference. And it's grunt. It's not 5 minutes on the internet and you're done. It's a lot of work. But hey, guess what? You save a life, worth it.
Okay, so the next breakout session starting in like 5 minutes, so we'll have to end here, but do another round of applause, and then just really quick, some reminders to visit the exhibitors and the photo booth if you haven't already, either on your way to the next breakout session or after that one's over. Thanks.
Thank you. It's like, this is kind of, it seems pretty obvious, but I didn't take it I just
I'm so sorry.
Is that right?
Okay, hello and welcome everyone to breakout session 2B and the truth about Planned Parenthood is the title of this breakout session. My name is Stephanie Kaker. I'm a student at St. Louis University. I'm a member of Students for Life, and I'm moderating this. So today we're joined by acclaimed speakers, David B. Wright and Sue Thayer. We will hear from both of them during the session, and there will be about 10 minutes at the end of the session for questions. So Sue Thayer worked for nearly 18 years as the center manager of the Planned Parenthood Clinic in Storm Lake, Iowa. She was fired in 2008 when webcam abortion was being introduced to Planned Parenthood, and has gone on to become a strong voice for life, including educating the public about the tragedies of abortion. She is the founder and director of Cornerstone for Life Pregnancy Center. And David B. Wright helped to start and build a local grassroots coalition in his hometown of College Station, Texas, where he led the first ever 40 Days for Life campaign. In 2005, he moved to Washington, D.C. to serve as the executive director for the American Life League until being asked to lead the National 40 Days for Life campaign. His pro-life work has been featured in hundreds of media outlets, including CBS, USA Today, and the Washington Post. So please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
Well, thank you. I really feel like I need to stand up here for a minute. I've never conducted a band before. Anyway, you heard a little bit about me, and you heard from both David and I in this morning's session a little bit. But one of the things that we talked about this morning is when life begins. And you know, the great thing about the day and age that we live in is silence. You know, when I worked at Planned Parenthood, we had old ultrasound machines, the 2D. So you could see some stuff, but you know, not a lot of detail. Well, when they started doing webcam abortions, they got the brand new state-of-the-art 4D ultrasound machines. And you can see fingernails on a little teeny tiny unborn baby with a 4D ultrasound machine. And I remember women that had worked in abortion facilities in Iowa for many years that bought into the, you know, it's a blob of tissue. We call it products of conception, contents of uterus, parts of children. On bad days, we would actually say that kind of stuff. But once we got those ultrasound machines, it was really undeniable that it was indeed a baby. And I just had the unique opportunity to be in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I know I'm talking to people here that are from Nebraska, but they had a judiciary meeting trying to put some language in a bill about reporting. So women seeking an abortion would have to have certain things said to them and the ultrasound shown to them before they had an abortion. But in this hearing, there was a Nebraska state senator there that actually said in this hearing that we all know it's just a zygote. Now, a zygote is the single cell. This is a zygote. When the sperm meets the egg and there's one cell, that's a zygote. As soon as it divides, it's no longer a zygote. But Senator Ernie Chambers said, until it passes through the birth canal, it's not human. We all know that. And I got so upset and so angry that he was saying that, and he launched into this 45-minute tirade, really, about pro-life people, and they're so uninformed, and of course everybody that was in the hearing just had to sit there and take it, and there was no way to fight back. I hate to use the word fight back, but the term fight back, but really, you know, it was a great example for me of someone who's in a leadership position as a state senator who's so grossly misinformed. And just this slide in and of itself speaks volumes, because we know that the moment the sperm meets the egg, there's fertilization and there's a unique individual. And science is on our side, because when that sperm meets the egg, there's DNA, and that cell is unique from everyone else that's ever lived. Each one of us here, I think we have 7.2 billion people on Earth, and every single one of us is unique, created in God's image, and we're each one special. So it's really, you know, that's really, I think, our very best argument about life is that God has a plan for us, and we're all unique. We're closing in on 58 million babies that have died, and it's just hard to imagine, really, that number. I'm from a small town in Iowa. We have 10,000 people there. I don't begin to know them all. And 10,000 seems like a lot, you know, because you don't know everybody in town. 58 million? I mean, what does that look like? And those that were aborted in 1973 would have had children. And some of them would have even had grandchildren, because that was 42 years ago. So we've lost more than we can even begin to imagine. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Planned Parenthood. Talked about this a little bit this morning. 542 million taxpayer dollars in the last fiscal year went to Planned Parenthood. For every adoption referral, they do 145 abortions. Now, an adoption referral at Planned Parenthood is simply if a pregnant woman checks the box that says, I'm interested in information about adoption. They count that as an adoption referral. And finally, in about 2007, they partnered with a pro-choice adoption agency. I didn't know such a thing existed, but Planned Parenthood managed to find one. And those are women that are, it's an organization that actually still, even though they're an adoption agency, kind of steer women towards the choice of abortion. So Planned Parenthood does a lot of things they don't really want to talk about. This is one of my very favorite slides. And I don't know, do you know that guy, David? Well, it's out of 40 Days for Life. And I just love the look on his face. Look at the ultrasound. You know, Planned Parenthood claims to be about choice. But they never want a woman to know the whole story. And I was trained to say things to our clients like, you cannot pay $10 today for your pregnancy test. How do you think you take care of a baby? And they were kind of subtle ways, but it was planting that seed in the woman's mind, you know, that you're not going to be able to do this. Do you have anybody to support you? And almost always the answer is no. And so it was a way that Planned Parenthood employees are trained, really, to funnel the women into the abortion facility. In the clinic that I worked at, we didn't do abortions there until they started doing webcam right after I was gone. But we had quotas for how many women we referred to an abortion facility. And then once they started doing webcam abortions, there was a goal for the number of abortions in each clinic. But I love this guy because at Planned Parenthood, when they do an ultrasound on a woman that's about to have an abortion, they turn the monitor. And I now volunteer at a pregnancy resource center. And of course, our whole thing is, can you see the monitor? You know, because we want them to see the little tiny heartbeat. And we know there's a heartbeat by day 18, day 20 for sure. And if the mom can see that little tiny heartbeat, 90% of those women that are seeking abortion or thinking about abortion are going to change their mind and choose life. So the ultrasound thing is a huge deal. I hope I get to meet that guy someday, because I think him standing outside of an abortion facility, just look at the ultrasound. You don't have to say a word. But if you held a sign like that in front of the abortion facility here in St. Louis, that's going to speak volumes to the women going in there. Well, the roots of Planned Parenthood are founded on a woman named Margaret Sanger. If you haven't heard about her, she's probably akin to Adolf Hitler. We heard a little bit about him this morning, but Margaret Sanger was just a very misguided soul, and the whole foundation of Planned Parenthood is built really on her ideas about birth control and a woman being able to control her destiny and her reproductive health, and that's the whole foundation of Planned Parenthood. And we talked a little bit this morning about how it's really a foundation of lies and really just evil. And this is the woman who's in large part responsible for that. And if you Google her and look at some of her quotes, I mean, she has said some really horrible things, and that's one of them right there. Miss Sanger was really into eugenics, which the definition is there, but kind of a white supremacy thing. Anybody of color, anybody who wasn't financially privileged really shouldn't live. And Planned Parenthood as a whole will target any town that has a college or university, because that's really their biggest base, high school and college. And they love to be in towns that have like a high percentage of non-English speaking people, minorities, African Americans, Hispanics, and anything that's not Caucasian. And if you look at the statistics about who has abortions, it's a lot higher for women of color. And that's really what Planned Parenthood does, is really target the weakest. The webcam abortion thing, you heard me say just a little bit about that this morning, but that was this whole big scheme of Planned Parenthood to be able to do abortions all across Iowa and eventually all across the nation with just one doctor. And they have trouble finding physicians that will travel, because every state, you know, is fairly big, and they've got to go here and here and here all across the state to do a surgical abortion. So they came up with the idea of the webcam thing. The doctor stays in her office at her computer, and when a woman comes into a remote center, the staff can say, hey, we can take care of that problem for you today, 45 minutes in and out. All you have to do is take a pill. And some states have what's called a waiting period, which is where a woman comes in, finds out she's pregnant, she has to go home for 24 hours or 48 hours before she can schedule an abortion. But Iowa doesn't have that. If she comes in the door and we did a urine pregnancy test, that's what we said to her was, it's positive, no worries, we can take care of the problem for you today, 45 minutes in and out. And that was a way for her to immediately start the abortion process. And Planned Parenthood knows that if a woman goes home and thinks about it, she's a lot less likely to come back in. So their whole model of the webcam thing was to market that protocol to every family planning clinic in the country. Not just Planned Parenthood affiliates, but all family planning clinics, essentially creating an abortion facility on every corner. And when they decided to do that, start this webcam process, the webcam procedure in different centers across Iowa, I think we had 17 at the time they started that. They had a donor who bought and paid for the 4D ultrasound machines and the fiber optics, the computers, all the things that go with that. So they had no outgoing expense to start up, and they charged the same for those as they did for a surgical abortion. So it is a big moneymaker for Planned Parenthood, and so far there's been the 17 states that have banned webcam abortion, and I'm sure in the ones that they haven't banned it, they're probably either doing webcam abortion or looking into it, because it's just a very lucrative thing for them, and it's a way to make money. And they like they called it the first in the nation webcam abortion idea. And the idea came from Jill June, who was the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Greater Iowa. She came up with the idea when she was watching like a crime scene show, like a CSI kind of thing, and they were using some kind of telemedicine, and thought, wow, that'd be a great way, we could do abortions that way. And they have, it's bad enough that they're doing the webcam abortion, but the thing that really got me was that they were gonna have people like me. I'm not a medical person, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, I don't have a degree in radiology. They were gonna have me and the people that I hired in my clinic, who are called clinic assistants, do transvaginal ultrasounds. And that's an invasive procedure. It's something that if I was gonna have that done, I wouldn't want somebody to do it on me that had only had 1 day of training. And Planned Parenthood will consistently say, our staff is trained and certified. Yeah, and trained and certified by whom? The Iowa Board of Medicine asked them, and they said, well, by our own doctor. Well, you never see a doctor at Planned Parenthood. There is one, but they're elusive. They're in another place. And in the small rural centers, they don't have doctors. They don't have nurse practitioners very often. They don't have any nurses or LPNs. It's usually the manager and a clinic assistant. And so we were going to be doing these transvaginal ultrasounds, and that was the point that I really started thinking, Planned Parenthood, they're well, for lack of a better word, crazy. They're over the line here. And I ended up calling Iowa Right to Life and telling them about this idea to do webcam abortion. And honestly, I don't think Iowa Right to Life believed me in the beginning, because it's just such a crazy thing to think that they're going to be doing abortions in 17 places with one doctor who never leaves her office. It's like, how can that be? But in fact, they do them, and we know for sure Iowa still does them, and Minnesota. We're trying to get them banned in Iowa, and it's actually before the Supreme Court in Iowa right now. So if you have extra prayer time, please pray for the 7 Supreme Court justices in Iowa that they'll make a good choice and actually finally ban webcam abortion. So we've been trying to get it banned there for a well, since 2008 when they started them, really. And so, David, I think I've taken up about my time.
Okay.
We're going to have maybe some time for questions at the end. Oh, is that my last one?
I have to have a timer, otherwise things could get out of control here. I'm going to take a little different direction than what I originally was thinking of doing with this session, because you can't get more credible than Sue in terms of talking about what's wrong with Planned Parenthood, because she's been there, she's done that. And I've certainly spent a lot of time researching Planned Parenthood from the outside, but what Sue shared with you, she has witnessed from the inside, years of experience, and has come out and been able to share that. And so what I really felt led to share with you today is a little bit about the importance of separating the person at Planned Parenthood from the organization. Because think about what a powerful advocate Sue Thayer is today, because people loved her when she worked at Planned Parenthood and prayed for her. And then when she had her change of heart and left the organization and saw that the big lie was what it was, I was up in Wisconsin a few months back, and I had a state legislator who said, you know, when Sue Thayer came and testified before our state house, that was the turning point when Wisconsin banned these webcam abortions. Sue's written articles in the Washington Times and all over the country and opinion pieces, and as a result, her message is changing hearts and minds and is helping to expose this big lie to other people. But that's why we have to separate the organization founded by Margaret Sanger on these bankrupt ideologies from the people who work there. Sue's one of my dear friends today. I love Sue. And in fact, the way I first got to know her, this is really funny, we go through, people apply to lead a 40 Days for Life campaign, we review their applications, we check references, and then we approve somebody and they sign up and we train them on how to lead a 40 Days for Life campaign. So unbeknownst to us, this lady named Sue Thayer signs up to do a 40 Days for Life campaign. She meets all the qualifications, great. We approve her to do this campaign in Storm Lake, Iowa, outside this webcam abortion Planned Parenthood facility. And all of a sudden, somebody sends us a message. It may have been Jennifer Bowen at Iowa Right to Life and said, by the way, do you know Sue's background? And I said, no. And they said, yeah, she used to direct that facility, and now she's leading the 40 Days for Life outside of it. I said, you're kidding me. So I got on the phone and called her right away. And I remember that. But I remember thinking just how beautiful God is, because when Sue got fired and left and over time was able to heal and leave this experience and start to see the reality of what she had thought Planned Parenthood was versus what it actually really was, and then she started to think about what can I do to be a part of the solution. And then you've told the story, I've been at events where we've talked about this, where a man in church came up and said, are you pro-life? And what are you going to do about it? And Sue thought back about, gee, when I worked at Planned Parenthood, they always hated that 40 days of harassment or 40 days of HE double hockey sticks or whatever they call it there. So maybe that's what we need to do. And so they signed up to do this 40 Days for Life and did it outside the Storm Lake Planned Parenthood facility. Now, think about how awkward that would be. Now, for all of us, it's awkward to go out and stand outside of a Planned Parenthood center already, right? But here's Sue, who used to manage that facility, who's standing outside there, and her former coworkers are walking by her every day as she's there loving on them and praying for them. Now, the good news is they did that one 40 Days for Life, and it had an absolutely powerful effect in that community. And before they could even do a second 40 Days for Life, the Storm Lake Planned Parenthood announced they were running out of customers, running out of business, and they announced they were closing that facility down. And I remember getting on the plane, Sean Carney and I flew from Washington, we flew into Des Moines, and we got in the only time in my entire life I've gotten upgraded at the rental car agency to a beautiful Mustang convertible was on a day when it was negative 12 degrees outside of Iowa. And so we drove across the state of the Storm Lake and had a big rally out there. There were, I don't know, 200 people out there. I mean, it was amazing, out in the snow and the cold. But to hear these people just praising God for closing this place down, but then for Sue to get up and thank the people who had prayed for her when she used to work there, and for her to thank God for closing down this place because she knew the reality of what was happening inside of there. What a powerful story that God can write. So what I'm encouraging all of us to think about today is as we realize how bad an organization Planned Parenthood is, we need to see the people who work there as human beings, there but for the grace of God go I, and we need to love them out of the work that they do. That's what we need to do. So when I've met Sue and I've met Abby Johnson, I've met many, many former Planned Parenthood workers, and almost all of them got into working at Planned Parenthood because they were people who wanted to help other people, and they thought, well, here's an organization that they tell me they want to help people, and they went to work for them because, well, I like helping people. And only after they got sucked in did they start to realize, oh, this isn't helping, this is hurting. But many of the people got in it for good reasons, only to find out the organization itself was doing harmful things. Abby Johnson, I'm very personally connected to because Abby was the director of the Planned Parenthood facility outside of which the very first 40 Days for Life campaign was done in College Station, Texas. So Abby was the person that the world said was our enemy. We were on opposite sides of this divisive issue, right? She was the manager of the Planned Parenthood abortion center there that had done thousands of abortions. Well, Abby, when Planned Parenthood was there and 40 Days for Life started, Abby was a volunteer and then worked her way up to become the director. So Abby actually worked there throughout 9 different 40 Days for Life campaigns. And she called them all the mean things that Sue describes. She would come out and say choice words to us through the fence and call the police on us when nothing was wrong. But Abby was this person who was just very angry about this whole thing happening. But it was during a 40 Days campaign as people were praying outside. And now keep in mind, those people always loved her. They always prayed for her. They never came out and screamed at her. They never called her names. They never berated her. They loved her so that even when she spilled out her wrath and anger on people, they would return that with love. And isn't that what we're called in Scripture to do, right? We're called to respond in that way. So those people always did that. Well, that way there was an environment out there that when Abby had that fateful moment that she was called back into the abortion procedure room, there was an environment out there already waiting for her. She went into the procedure room, and the abortionist was there from out of town. He said, Abby, I need to do an ultrasound-guided abortion. Now, she had never seen one of those before. It was not a standard procedure. Typically, the abortionist would just go in blind and do this invasive abortion, tearing the arms and the legs off the children. But that day, he said, I need to do this ultrasound-guided abortion, and he said, I need your help. And so Abby was the person who had the probe and had it on the abdomen of the mother and was holding that and watching on the television screen as this 13-week-old baby boy was about to be aborted. Now, when the procedure began, she was, of course, a little bit squeamish about, is this going to be really bad? Is this going to be, what's it going to be like? Then she said, wait a minute, no, Planned Parenthood has always told us that it's just a blob of tissue, and no, this isn't going to be bad. It's a great learning experience for me. But as she saw the abortionist get the cannula, the thin tube that is used for the abortion, and insert it in, she saw on the screen as that baby started to move around trying to get away from that probe as it poked and prodded the baby. And she said she could see the baby jerk away in pain. Well, finally, the abortionist pinned the baby up against the uterus wall, and then he callously joked to one of the assistants in the procedure room, and he said, beam me up, Scotty. The Star Trek reference that he was using to tell her, turn on the suction machine. And the assistant turned on the machine, and that suction, more powerful than a household vacuum cleaner through that little tiny straw, she watched that little baby fighting for a brief few seconds for his life, and then limb by limb, as they were ripped off the body of that child, and the last thing she saw was the spinal cord go down that little tube, Abby watched that little boy lose his life. And she instantly knew, I've lived a lie. I believed the lie when I had my abortions. I've sold the lie to thousands of women, and I am a part of an organization that is killing children. She went back to her office, and she closed her door, and she cried, because she thought, all I have ever been is pro-choice since I've worked at Planned Parenthood. All of my friends are pro-choice. Where do I go? What do I do? And she looked out her window, and there were some of those people who month after month were loving her, were praying for her, were there for her, even when she came out and cussed at them, even when she came out and threatened to have them arrested, there were those people out there praying. And she said it was as if God said, that's where you need to go. And so Abby ran to them and then ran next door to the local Coalition for Life organization office and walked in the door and talked to Sean Carney, who I now work with at 40 Days for Life, and she said, I'm ready to get out. Abby Johnson was the 2008 Planned Parenthood Employee of the Year, and God opened her eyes, peeled away the scales because people were praying and because it was an environment that she felt safe going to, once she realized the lie. Well, she began her journey out, and if you've followed her story any way at all, it's amazing what happened. But immediately Planned Parenthood found out she'd gone to the other side, and so they filed a massive lawsuit and restraining order against her to try to shut her down. They didn't want her talking about what she had seen inside the abortion industry. They didn't want people like Sue there going around and telling people, no, here's what Planned Parenthood really is. I've been there, I've done that, I had the experience. So on the day they came in court, it was Abby and Sean and this East Texas attorney that up against Planned Parenthood. It's literally Madison Avenue PR people. They had their attorneys from Houston. They had this whole fleet of people in the courtroom. And on that day, the truth won out. And Abby and her attorney won, and Planned Parenthood lost. And Abby was freed up to tell her story. And she since has been on every major media outlet in America. She's spoken to over 1 million people in person. Her book, Unplanned, if you've not read it, you need to get it. You need to read it. You need to share it with others. That tells her story. Many, many people have become aware of what happens inside Planned Parenthood because people loved her out. And she describes that that's what won her over. Let me give you one more story, and this is another amazing story of what God can do if we are willing to love, peacefully, perfectly love these people out of what they're in. Because God's already preparing the way. We don't even know that. There's a lady named Ramona Trevino. And Ramona was the director of Planned Parenthood in North Texas, in the town of, I'm blanking on the name of the town, Sherman, Texas. It's north of Dallas-Fort Worth. So Ramona was the director of Planned Parenthood, and it was not a facility that did abortion. It was similar to what Storm Lake was before the webcam abortion thing. But Ramona was working there at Planned Parenthood as the manager, and a guy named Jerry Brundage signed up to lead the first ever 40 Days for Life outside of this place. Now, Jerry had been scared, and in one time before, thought about signing up to do a 40 Days for Life, decided, no, I'm not going to do that. The next time came around, he said, no, I've got to do it. He signed up, and people started getting involved and going out to pray. Well, Jerry, on day 2 of their campaign, drove out for his shift. He was supposed to go out for an hour. Nobody else had signed up. He was running about 5 minutes late. He thought, oh, no, there's going to be a gap in our visual. Nobody's going to be there. But when he pulled up, he saw some lady came without signing up. He said, yes, somebody was there. And he saw the lady as she was there, was talking to someone else. And as he parked, he got up and walked over. It was the manager of Planned Parenthood, Ramona. So he assumes, oh no, she is berating our person. She's yelling at our volunteers. She'll never come back again. And he walks over, and Ramona's smiling. And she's saying, I was just asking, is this a 40 Days for Life? And Jerry said, yes. She said, that's great. Now that was not the answer he was expecting from this Planned Parenthood manager. She said, well, I've been really struggling for a while. My conscience was working with this organization that does all these abortions. And the other day I was driving home and I was tuning through my radio and I stumbled onto a Catholic radio station and they were talking about this person, Abby Johnson. And Jerry said, yes. She said, well, that was amazing. I felt like that was my story. And Jerry said, well, I just happen to have a copy of her book in my car. Would you like to read it? She said, yes. So Jerry ran over and got one of his 20 copies of the book in his car, ran over and gave it to Ramona. She read it that night. She came back and said, that spoke so much to me. I'm really struggling with working here, and I feel like I need to leave, but I'm the main provider for my family. And Jerry said, we're here. We're here to help you. We will do anything to help you get out of here. Well, the whole campaign finished, and she still hadn't left because she was this financial provider. She was still grappling with all of this. But at the end of the campaign came, it finished, it was over, and over this time, God continued to work on her, and one day, Ramona suddenly felt led to go back to church. She had been raised a Catholic, had drifted away, and finally said, I need to go back. She went to church, and it happened to be, for those who are Catholic, it happened to be Divine Mercy Sunday, and it happened to be the day of the beatification of John Paul II. And she went into church that day, and as she sat in the pew, she said it was as if God was saying, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, you need to leave. So the next day, she was on the phone with me and Sean Carney and some other people, and we said we will do whatever we can. We talked about the legal things she needed to be prepared for, and she turned in her notice, and she quit. Here's the good news. That Planned Parenthood was doing well financially, but she was their business manager. And when Ramona quit, that place went into a tailspin. Their numbers started dropping. They went into the red financially. And then not long after that, the state of Texas passed a measure to strip Planned Parenthood of $13 million of taxpayer funding. And that facility was one of the first ones to get the axe and be closed down. And again, I flew in for the day when they had the big celebration outside. And it was so neat to see all these people who had been praying for this to happen. But the main speaker that day was Ramona Trevino. And she shared how these people had loved her out of Planned Parenthood, and she thanked God for closing the place that she used to manage. These stories happen over and over and over again. So as you become equipped and empowered with the knowledge of what Planned Parenthood is about, what the organization is, the harm they're doing, the hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money they're taking, how they go into the public schools and their so-called sex education programs by their own internal measures, increase promiscuity by 152% amongst those who go through those programs, because then they come back to them and get into crisis pregnancies and they can sell the abortions. When you find out about all the different types of abortions, how they try to expand abortions and set goals to do more abortions, as you learn all of this, what I really want you to do is set aside the organization and instead focus on the people who work there and think about how you can pray and how you can love those people to come out, because those are one of the most powerful forces in the world. Abby Johnson describes it as Planned Parenthood's weak link, because the weakest link is the workers who are in there putting those body parts together after the abortions. They actually take, after the abortion, they take the bag with all the remains, and there's a technician who's sent to another room to piece back to make sure they have the hands and the feet and all the body parts, as disgusting as this sounds, because they need to make sure nothing was left behind so there's not an infection, and the woman is not going to have problems after this factor. These workers are devastated by these experiences. The Planned Parenthood is a miserable place to work, particularly at the abortion-providing Planned Parenthoods. And you and I need to just simply be a part of God's plans, to do what we can, yes, to educate people, but to go and to pray and to stand outside these facilities, and then to be available when God prepares their hearts that they are ready to leave. We need to have faith that they will leave. A good friend of mine is a former abortionist. His name is Dr. Haywood Robinson. He's an African-American man from Los Angeles. His wife, Noreen Johnson, also, she's an OBGYN, and they used to do abortions together. They moonlighted, made a lot of money on the weekends doing abortions right after graduating from medical school. And then they had a conversion, and now they're amazing pro-life advocates. Haywood's on our board of directors for 40 Days for Life. One day I went in to meet Haywood for breakfast. So we used to get together every Friday for breakfast, and he was one of my confidants, my mentors. And I would go to Haywood and I'd say, Haywood, I'm having a really hard time loving these people at Planned Parenthood. They're being really awful. They're being really ugly. They're persecuting our family. They're doing really mean things. And Haywood just slammed his fist down on the table and he said, if there was hope for me, there's hope for every one of them. Don't ever give up faith of what God can do in their lives. And one of those people was Abby Johnson. And look what God has done. So have faith. Have hope that God can bring more workers out, because the profound impact that they can have. They have experience that you and I have not had. They can share that experience in front of state houses, in front of the U.S. Congress, on the media, and to audiences. They'll have credibility that you and I don't have. So have hope that more of these workers will come out and have love. Faith, hope, love, these three remain, but the greatest of these is love. We need to love these people. They, just like the unborn child, are made in the image and the likeness of God Almighty. And we need to love them, not for what they are doing, but for whose they are, who created them, and for what they can become. And if we do that, we will see many more workers leave and many, many more workers becoming powerful advocates on behalf of life. I believe Planned Parenthood, when it ceases to exist as an organization, it will be primarily because of God moving in the workers who leave that place and come out and share their stories. And you can be the vessels that can help to make that happen. So, are we ready to bring down Planned Parenthood as an organization by loving the workers out of these places?
Yep.
Yes. Amen. All right. So with that, we have a little bit of time for some Q&A, and we'll bring Sue back up. I'll take a swig of water to refresh my voice, and then we will answer whatever questions you've got.
Right, so we can thank both speakers for sharing with us.
I was at this camp thing and we went and we were praying in the abortion clinic, and one of the clinic workers actually came outside and was taking pictures of us on her phone. What was that for? We were all kind of like, this is really weird. We're out there praying our Divine Mercy Chapel, but we don't know what this is for. And she's gonna call the police on us or what she's doing.
That's a great question. Did y'all hear? They were outside praying and the clinic worker came outside and took pictures, and they do that kind of two reasons, but mostly to intimidate. We used to have this thing in Storm Lake called the Chocolate Extravaganza. It's a big event to raise money for Planned Parenthood. And people would come and they'd go back and forth on the sidewalk. And I remember having a camera and standing right in the middle of the sidewalk taking pictures of them. And I made them walk around me. I mean, that's how mean I was. And they put those pictures up because, I don't know if you know who Lila Rose is. I mean, they have her picture up everywhere. Anybody that they think is going to show up and protest or picket, they want their pictures. So they'll save the pictures and put them up. They'll send them to other centers so that if a person is showing up at 3 or 4 different centers, they want to know who that is, and they try to inflate that and say, oh, they'll do this thing called Pledge a Picket, where they'll call their supporters, the Planned Parenthood supporters, and say, we have 10 picketers today. Will you pledge, $10 per picketer? And so it's kind of a sensationalist thing where they like it because in a way it makes them look like, oh, we're under stress here, we're under attack by the religious right crazies, all that stuff. And, just smile and wave, really, because they can call the police, but most times in towns where they do that, the police are they're on the public sidewalk, they're not shouting, they're not yelling. You can stand anywhere and pray. And so do not be intimidated by that. And just like we've heard here today, just, pray for you, God bless you, and they hate that. Yes, sir.
I have a question. You can ask this. You were saying about how they have faith sex ed classes in schools or whatever, and they have those programs. What are those programs, and what are they funded by?
Well, I was a sexuality educator for Planned Parenthood for all those years and spoke to hundreds of classes. And of course, each person that works for Planned Parenthood is at liberty to kind of do their own way of educating, but it's all based on use pills, use condoms, foam, diaphragms, Norplant, Plan B, all of that. We talked about all those different methods of birth control, which are all very fallible and don't really work very well. But you establish a rapport with those students, and the people that they send into the schools are usually people that can connect with the kids. I mean, I've lived in Storm Lake, small Iowa town, all my life, and my kids, 2 of whom are here, I mean, Kim could probably get up here and tell you what that was like to sit in a 10th grade health class when I was the condom lady up in front. And I'm ashamed. I have apologized to her and my other adult daughter for doing that. But, you know, the lesson underneath all that is God does forgive us for our terrible mistakes. But it's all about establishing a relationship with the youth in the community so they feel comfortable coming to Planned Parenthood. They used to have free Plan B giveaways. Those are abortifacients, pills that cause abortion, early abortion up to 5 days after a single act of unprotected intercourse. And they want those people to come in and get those so they feel comfortable coming to Planned Parenthood. So that's the whole thing about sex ed with Planned Parenthood. And, I mean, there'd be one little line, you know, abstinence means never having intercourse with anybody outside of the, you know, a monogamous relationship, and that was all that was ever said about abstinence. So.
To answer your question about funding, there was just a report released this past week. A number of representatives and senators in the U.S. Congress asked for the Government Accounting Office to do a financial accounting of money that went to Planned Parenthood. They found out there was a whole lot more than they even thought was going to Planned Parenthood, and a large majority of that was being used for these various different educational programs. Most places, Planned Parenthood is not able to use tax dollars to directly fund abortions, but they get around that by using it to market abortions through these programs that get young people sexually active to where they're going to have these birth control methods that then fail, and then they're going to be coming in for an abortion, and that's where they then make their profit. So you and I, as taxpayers, if you work a job and you're paying even a little bit of tax out of your paycheck, your parents' tax money, all of that is being contributed to the organization that is destroying life and is promoting these unhealthy lifestyles.
Where do you find the doctors that perform the abortions? Like, where do they learn how to do abortion?
Well, they're actually in very short supply, doctors who are willing to do that. When I started at Planned Parenthood in 1991, we had like 5 or 6. And by the time I left, we had 2. And those 2 were very nervous about showing their face for obvious reasons. But in the actual abortion room, they have the lights real low, it's very dark, and the doctor actually, you get the patient all the way ready, and the patient is like here, and the doctor comes in, doesn't speak to the patient, comes clear around to the foot of the bed and sits down so she doesn't ever have to make eye contact, because she does not want that patient to see her face. So that's why they came up with the webcam idea, because one doctor can potentially do abortions in many states all at the same time, you know. So they're very short supply, and in Iowa they're flying a woman in now, and she actually wears a mask because she doesn't want anybody to see her face. So, you know, God put that in our heart to know right from wrong, and I can certainly identify with being in a bad place and rationalizing, justifying the bad things that you're doing, but deep down, you know, they know that what they're doing is wrong, especially if they're actually doing the abortions. It's very difficult to find a physician that, you know, is willing to do that.
One of the things you find too is a lot of those who do abortions, very few people go into medical school saying, gee, I want to rip children apart. Very few do. So many times those who are very unsuccessful as physicians, maybe they're the bottom of their class, where they get out, and you have a lot of abortionists who have history of sexual abuse of patients and other things, and all they can get is a gig running around moonlighting doing abortions in different towns. So you'll see them hopping around from town to town to town. They are many times these bottom of the barrel physicians that you would never want touching you as a medical provider. The other thing is, because of the shortage they're experiencing as abortionists are going to jail, the Kermit Gosnells of the world, as they're losing their licenses, we're seeing more and more of that happening. As they're dying of old age, as they're retiring, and this shortage is happening, you have the abortion industry getting very desperate. So two things that they're resorting to. Number one is in states like California, they're resorting to trying to get lower and lower level of medical providers, nurse practitioners, and even they're trying to get it down to lower levels of like on that hierarchy of medicine to be able to do abortions because they can't get physicians who are willing to do it. And then the other thing they're trying to do is force those who go through OBGYN training to be forced to go through abortion training. So in New York City, for example, when Michael Bloomberg was the mayor there, he had gotten millions of dollars in his campaign war chest from the abortion industry, and his political payback, 1 out of 7 OBGYNs in America is trained in New York City. So he passed a law requiring that these medical schools, if you're going through OBGYN training, you have to go through abortion training. And at the last second, after all this pressure, they create a little loophole that, okay, you can jump through 32 different hoops if you don't want to have to go through this. But basically trying to force people to do it, and then after they've done it, their conscience is more numb. So these are the kind of things the abortion industry is getting to. That's a great accomplishment of our movement, that even if abortion is not illegal, I mean, Columbia, Missouri is a great example of that. How long has it been, Mike, that you guys have been without an abortionist coming to Columbia?
Pretty much over 2 years.
Over 2 years. So there is a shortage of abortionists, and that keeps children from dying. It keeps women from being wounded. So good news. We just have to pray for more of that to happen.
Where can you?
Go ahead.
Where can you find a list of all of the other organizations that give to Planned Parenthood? Because you hear rumors about this person does and this person does, and the Girl Scouts and this do and they do, but it's really hard to figure out what's true and what's not. Do you know of a place that you can get a good list?
Go ahead first if you have. I mean, there are a lot of groups that do kind of a smattering of that. There's a few that kind of have tried to make that their mainstay of what they do. There's questions of credibility on, well, if they gave 10 years ago, was it somebody gave a gift certificate from this place? What I would say is do your homework. I always like to see documentation and evidence. So if there's a company that's proud of their support of Planned Parenthood and they advertise that, I'm not going to shop at that company. If you have organizations like the Girl Scouts, there's been a long history of entanglement with Planned Parenthood. There are individual Girl Scout troops that don't touch Planned Parenthood, but the Girl Scout national organization is deeply connected with Planned Parenthood. You can get the documentation on that. There are other big charities that give money to Planned Parenthood. Some United Way chapters do. And so, again, you need to do your homework. We don't want to run around and say, well, everybody's giving money to Planned Parenthood and tar some good company's name. But there are, unfortunately, quite a few companies, foundations, even charitable individuals who give money to Planned Parenthood, and that's one of the things that keeps them afloat. So there's one group that is kind of the mainstay that most people look to. Their website is fightpp.org, and that's Doug Scott at Life Decisions International. They have a printed list that many people I know say is as close to accurate as you can get. But I even still with that, I look at that and say, okay, I want to see the documentation myself before rushing into to judgment. But when I see, and that's something I would say, another way you can make a difference. If you find a company or an organization that you find directly supporting Planned Parenthood and they're publicly proclaiming that, number one, I would encourage you to consider whether or not you want your dollars to go to that organization. And number two, make sure to send them a message to let them know why you're no longer frequenting them as a business or giving them as a charitable organization. Because if they don't hear from you, they'll think that everybody's just fine with it. So not a really solid answer for you. If Sue has any other thoughts on that.
The only other place I would know is called Second Vote. It's a 2 and then ndvote.com, and they're fairly new, but they seem to have some pretty good research. This is a side note, when they started doing these webcam abortions and everything was donated, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars in technology, and it was all donated by Warren Buffett. So the God owns the cattle on 1,000 acres.
Just a quick follow-up, David, on that question. You can Google Planned Parenthood and that company and put those two search words together, and very often you can come up with a flyer that they help sponsor some event for Planned Parenthood, or they're on somebody's annual report one way or the other. So that's a good way to follow up.
And the only thing I would suggest on that, I think it's very wise advice, is just because somebody is saying that that company gives on the internet, again, do that little bit of additional research to make sure that you're either seeing it from the company or there's some documentation of evidence of that. Because there are legitimate, I'll give you a case in point of this, and this is why I'm very, very particular about this. We had a list, Planned Parenthood published a list in our community, here's the businesses that give to us. And so we sent a letter to all those businesses. We told them, please stop giving to Planned Parenthood. If you don't, we're going to publish this list to the wider community so that people know not to take their dollars to the businesses and give to Planned Parenthood. Well, one of those businesses was a Christian family-owned business, and they had never given to Planned Parenthood. What had happened is Planned Parenthood went in, bought a gift certificate from that business, gave it at their auction, and so they listed the business to try to make it look like everybody in the community supports us. And so we were very close to making a family-owned Christian business look bad because of Planned Parenthood law. So again, just do your homework and make sure that you use accuracy and integrity in everything we do. But when you do find out, then please let those businesses or those foundations know, hey, this isn't a good thing. You can really make a difference. There was a question over here I think we missed earlier. Sorry.
Yes, actually, what I'm curious about is, what would you say is the quote typical, as if there's such a thing, typical reason that someone goes to work for Planned Parenthood, and what's the quote typical reason that they leave? I'm trying to get a sense of whether are people really wedded to the mission? Is it more it's a job and it pays the bills? Is it there? It's so diverse that there's no such thing as a.
Well, I think it's diverse, you know, but Planned Parenthood is really good at reaching out to people that they want to come in, you know, and you have to be a really strong-willed person, I think, to work there. But there's a certain excitement about being there because it's always cutting edge, you know, there's always like a lot going on and a lot of change, and it's real fast paced. And so for me, that kind of appealed to me. But it was also very good money, and I made a lot of money when I worked there. I had great benefits, and this sounds kind of stupid, but it was close to my house and I could ride my bike. And I didn't grow up in a home where I really understood much about abortion. I was, you know, in middle school, high school, whatever, when Roe v. Wade passed. And I remember being in the interview and she said, what do you think of our surgical services? And I said, what surgical services? You know, I didn't know. And she said, well, we do abortions at our Des Moines and Iowa City locations. And I said, oh, well, I think that's murder. I mean, even at that point, I'd had 2 children and I knew that abortion was not good, but still ended up getting the job. But I think Abby would say that, you know, she really bought into kind of that excitement thing too and felt like she was helping women. And in Storm Lake, we serve a population where they didn't have another place to go. And a lot of people don't speak English. And so it felt good working there. And in all honesty, you know, they do pap smears and breast exams. And, you know, people say to me, but they do some good stuff. And I'll say, yeah, but if they do 1 abortion, that cancels all the good stuff. But there are some good things that they do there. And so, you know, people do buy into that.
My wife has a great way. We have our 16-year-old and our 12-year-old. So my wife has a way of putting things in a language that the kids will understand. She used to teach first grade as well. So Planned Parenthood in our town used to always say, depending on the year, abortion is only 3%, 5%, 7% of our services, and trying to justify that, well, it's just a little bitty thing we do. So whenever people would say this, my wife would respond to them. She said, you know what, I'm going to go home and I'm going to make you a batch of brownies. And I'm only going to put 3% dog poop in the recipe. And I'm going to bring you those brownies. How many are you going to eat? And they'd all be like, oh, that's nasty. She'd say, exactly. That 3% voids the other 97%. And truly, that little bit, you know, the way they try to spin that, it's deadly, it's awful what they do. So yes.
I recently, in our English class, we had to choose an essay thing, and I chose to do like taxpayer funds that are going to Planned Parenthood, and so I had to like do research on that. And on there was like this pie chart, and they say that like mammograms are like a large percent of what they provide. And when I did like further research, they don't actually like provide actual mammograms. Not like they don't at all. They just provide referrals, and they count that as like providing like a mammogram. And then also when they talk about like birth control, like if they give you a condom, they consider that, like they add that to their tally of like where we provide like birth control and stuff like that.
That's very true.
And let's see, there was like this interview thing, and he did this work, and he said that like when you do like the research and you take the numbers and everything, it's more realistic to say like 40% of what Planned Parenthood does.
If you're a pregnant woman and you get in the door of Planned Parenthood, it's very likely you're going to have an abortion because the people there are trained to get you in the abortion unit. That's their job.
we're about to wrap up. Can I just share one last just anecdote, kind of the happy ending to this story? Planned Parenthood's a bad organization. The people we gotta pray for and love out of the Planned Parenthood. But can we make a difference against this organization? I one time had a very prominent pro-life leader I had breakfast with, and he said, come on, do you really think we can make a difference against a multi-billion-dollar organization like Planned Parenthood? And I said, well, yes, my God is bigger than that. And, you know, I think he was thinking in world times, but sometimes don't we feel that way? Here's this huge organization. Can we, little bitty people, the Davids going up against this Goliath, can we really win? We got to remember who won that story. But here's the happy ending. I told you about Abby having her change of heart and leaving. I told you about others of these. That Planned Parenthood facility, I shared this in the last session, a few of you were at, that Planned Parenthood facility just closed down in 2013 after 13 40 Days for Life campaigns outside its doors. Not only did it shut down, but then the pregnancy center was able to buy the building, and they then gave part of the space to 40 Days for Life. We are moving our headquarters for 40 Days for Life into the former Planned Parenthood abortion facility. And just a few weeks ago, I went, first time I've ever set foot on the property and ever went into the building. I was there for our board meeting to plan out the future of 40 Days for Life. And to go in with Haywood Robinson, a former abortionist, and our board, to go into this facility where God has redeemed a place where thousands of children lost their lives, where this lie was being sold that eventually went out of business and closed its doors. The pregnancy center that bought is in the process of remodeling it. And because they're going to strip out everything, they went through and in every room they gave their board members and volunteers markers, and there are Bible verses written in every corner of that facility. And they had a priest, a local priest, come in and do an exorcism over the facility, and they've had prayer all over it. But I just want you to realize that what you do makes a difference, not only to the workers, but to close these facilities so that no more children will die there, no more women will ever cry there again. And one day, I believe each of you will have the opportunity to stand inside of a Planned Parenthood facility that is closed, that is out of business, that is no longer doing any good, and that place can be used for good, just like the workers who used to work inside it can be used by God for good. So what you are doing makes a difference. Winning against Planned Parenthood can truly change our culture for good. So with that, God bless and enjoy your next
Allison, you won't do anything. And you know that.
We grew up in like like every Catholic. Father Gerber used that in one of his homilies, and we made a mug ball. I think, yeah. I would each got one. I'm pretty sure, yeah, we each got one. Loud.
Yeah, they met the mixer.
Right. Right, because and like the room was smaller, so on the page it was like repeat each question, but we didn't really.
Oh, yeah.
I think we had good.
I think Brian should be.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That was exciting, yeah.
I'm here to grab one of them, which apparently we left in here. There it is. I'm bringing video equipment into the main facility.
That's right.
Live feed. Turn on the live feed.
David gets on stage.
Do you have it here?
Yeah, it's right here. Did they take the sand?
No, we can't touch it.
Sand comes too. All right, you're the expert. Make it happen.
We'll make it with it.
Check, 1, 2. Okay, everybody, let's everybody get settled in now. Everybody get settled in your seats because we're going to get ready to really rock the house here in just a few minutes. So everybody settle in, relax, and yeah, beach balls can be set down. Thank you.
Okay, who's excited? Oh, you have heard from amazing speakers all day, but it's time to stop listening to speakers. It's time to have some fun and have a party, amen? Okay. There's a little town in Ohio, it's not so little, it's called Toledo, Ohio, and it's a place that's very memorable for two things. Number one, Toledo, Ohio did a 40 Days for Life campaign. I'm a little biased towards that. The lady who ran that campaign did it on faith. She had never done anything pro-life before. She ran one campaign, then another. It built momentum, and it closed down the abortion facility in Toledo, Ohio. So let's get right into that. But something else has happened in the town of Toledo, Ohio. It's the birthplace of the band you are about to party down with. Toledo, Ohio is where this band is from. They formed there in Toledo, although some of the members now they live a little bit across the border into Michigan, but they're all there in that part of the state of Ohio and in Michigan. They were formed 18 years ago, in the year of 1996. And in an interview, somebody was asking them, why do you keep doing it? What keeps you going? And they said, we wouldn't just do it for the #1 hits. We do it because we feel that God called us to do it. Their ministry is through music. How many of you realize that when God calls you to do something, you better answer, amen? And God called them to do this ministry, and as a result, they've had an unbelievable career with many, many hit songs. They've had 2 Grammy nominations. They've had numerous chart-topping songs, including Lead Me and Forgiven. These are guys that are after God's own heart in what they do. I was out at their booth right before we came in for this session, and I asked the ladies who were working the booth, I said, okay, what's their very best album? And without even thinking for a second, they both said, oh, the new one, The Dream. And so now your dream is about to come true as you hear from the band, Saint It's Real. Please welcome them.
It's good to be here with y'all, and thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks for having us. And we're blessed to be a part of something that's fighting for life. And we're so this song is about redemption. It's called Redeemer. Don't be afraid to stand up and put your hands together now. Come on. Let's go. Everything looks like a wreck, and I need the courage to carry on, 'cause I can't see what's ahead. And there are places I wish I could be, battles I've wanted to win, dreams that slip through my head, and they never get back again. But I'm still a dreamer, believer. Oh, I lost my faith in so many things, but I still believe in you. So you can be anything. Sometimes I just wish we could see all the way too easy to heal. Ignore the injustice we see. Let us blame every unanswered prayer. But I'd rather speak honestly. Wear a tattered heart on my sleeve. 'Cause in the middle of my broken dream, redemption is here. And I'm still a dreamer, believer. Oh, I lost my faith, it's so bad, but I still believe in you. 'Cause you are the answer, Redeemer. Oh, I'm giving up on too many things, but I'm not giving up on you. 'Cause you can make anything new. I don't care if we get super light, but trust in you one day at a time. This is how we are staying alive forever. This is where heaven and earth collide. Lift my hands and give my life. This is how my weary heart stays alive. Oh, I'm still a dreamer. I'm still a believer. 'Cause you are the answer. You can make anything. You're making everything. I'm loving this clap thing you guys got going on the front row here. You guys are keeping the party alive already. Goodness. Well, this next song is called Forgiven. How many people know what it feels like to be forgiven? Yeah? Well, the past is playing with my head. The failure knocks me down again. I'm reminded of the wrong that I have said and done. The devil just won't let me forget. And in this life, I know what I've been. Here in your arms, I know what I am. Oh, I'm forgiven. Oh, I'm forgiven. I don't have to carry away who I've been, 'cause I'm forgiven. My mistakes are running through my mind. I relive my days in the middle of the night. And I struggle with my pain, wrestle with my pride. Sometimes I feel alone when I cry. In this life, I know what I've been. Here in your arms, I know what I am. I'm forgiven. I'm forgiven. I don't have to carry away who I've been, 'cause I'm forgiven. When I'm so fair, and I don't feel like I've lost anywhere. And I don't measure up too much in this life. I'm a treasure in the arms of Christ. Yeah, 'cause I'm forgiven. I'm forgiven. I am forgiven. Where I go, I'm Thank you. Well, as was said before we came on stage, we did just come out with a brand new album called The Dream. And, well, thank you. I like that. I love this excitement, you guys. Man, this is good. This is good. So, we, see, there, you got this pro-life, you're celebrating life, too. And I love that. This song really is, it has a line in it that says, lay it down at the cross where your freedom's found. And we say things like that, in the church. And when we talk about our faith experience, sometimes those things can begin to seem really cliche to us, because they just sound like things that are easy to say. But man, I believe that surrendering our lives